Here. Happy Friday. Welcome to another live stream. We have got a lot to cover today. There is a lot going on in the world at the moment, and this will ultimately have a significant effect, I believe, on the price of gold and silver, on commodities. There are things we need to be doing to protect ourselves here. And to set the stage for what we're going to discuss in today's video, I want to start off just with the weekly chart of silver here, or not really the weekly chart, a 5-day chart, I guess you might say. Just the price action that we saw this week in the silver price. So we had this big spike up that was following the conclusion of the Federal Reserve FOMC's meetings. Very dovish meeting. Powell talking about inflation coming down, about how there's still going to be 3 rate cuts this year. The Fed dot plot confirming that. So this was interpreted as a very dovish sign. Markets loved this. Gold and silver loved this. We had a big day. And then this happened yesterday. We had this big takedown in the price of silver. What was that about? Well, that was on the release of what was perceived as positive data for the U.S. economy. Kind of put a dampening on the dovish vibes that we were all getting from the Federal Reserve at the FOMC meeting there. What we had was home sales coming out stronger than expected from February. We had an unexpected drop in the number of unemployment claims filed. So again, when we see unemployment going down or unemployment claims going down, even though those numbers are completely cooked, I mean, the way that they calculate that is not really indicative of the strength of the U.S. labor market. But these numbers came out and we saw a sell-off in the price of silver. But it really seems like markets ignored some of the significantly more important news in the big picture here, if you ask me. And that was that yesterday we got an announcement from the Swiss National Bank that they are now cutting interest rates. So interest rate cuts now have begun among Western central banks. The consensus was that they were going to keep rates where they were at 1.75%. Instead, they cut by 25 basis points down to 1.5. So, I mean, it's not a huge move. However, symbolically, this is a very big deal. Also, interestingly, this was like a surprise move, right? Nobody saw this coming. Nobody was forecasting cuts by the Swiss National Bank. Apparently, they are confident that they have got the inflation fight under control and that their program of rate hikes there in Switzerland were successful. However, it's very interesting to juxtapose that move by the Swiss National Bank to what central banks around the world in what you might call the global south or the east, the anti-US hegemon, whatever you want to call it. Central banks are hoarding gold at the fastest pace in modern times. So while you have Western central banks now beginning to cut rates, entering into a period of easier monetary policy that is likely going to drive inflation much higher. However, I mean, they're doing this because they think they have inflation beat. Central banks in the East, in China, in Russia, around the world, they're loading up on gold, on real money. So let me know what you think in the chat. Do you think that I've got that upside down, that bar there. Do you think that the Western central banks have it right, or do you think that the other ones around the world who are loading up on gold are calling for, a correct forecast? Let me know in the comments down below. Put a 1 if you think that rate cuts are the way that the West needs to go right now. Put a 2 if you think it's smarter to be stacking gold, because, I have some opinions on that, and I think that Western central banks are really setting us up for a crisis here. Of course, I mean, the thing is that their hands are tied. Western central banks are facing crises on multiple levels. They have an economy that is being held together by deficit spending that has to be financed by more debt. So, they've got to cut rates on that front to keep interest down. I mean, the interest on the U.S. national debt now over $1 trillion. So, they have to do this. They have an illiquid, insolvent banking system that is suffering at the hands of a commercial real estate collapse that is all due to higher rates. So they're going to have to get in there and cut rates. But I mean, it's already started, regardless of what U.S. economic data comes out that's positive, or, when we get high inflationary data, you might see another sell off in the price of gold and silver as investors just get this wrong. They think that central banks are going to be successful in their inflation fight, but that simply isn't the case. And we're seeing that with the fact that inflation remains elevated. It was very interesting at the press conference for the FOMC. You had Powell citing the high inflationary data that we got over the past couple of months, and he says that maybe it's a seasonal effect. Those were his words during the press conference. So I mean, he's really dismissing the inflation risk here, but inflation is back. I mean, it's rearing its head, and that's why central banks, the smart money, are loading up on gold. And it's only a matter of time as gold continues its breakout until silver follows. If you want to get some precious metals, make sure you check out today's video sponsor, SD Bullion. Right now, they have got this nice sale going on this SD Bullion exclusive, these Una and the Lion bars. They've got gold and silver bars. I've got one here to show you. Really a beautiful bar. It's inscribed with the moniker Dirige Deus Gressus Meos, which means may God guide my steps. And they're really a work of art, and they have any quantity pricing. So make sure you check those out. Now, let's change gears here a little bit and let's talk about some breaking news. This is really some serious stuff here going on in Russia at the moment, where just about an hour ago, news broke of a significant terror attack in Moscow, where armed gunmen have broken into a concert hall, killed more than 40 people, and wounded more than 100. Apparently, they've lit the venue on fire as well. So, real possibility that those casualty numbers could be moving higher. Now, at this point, doesn't look like anybody is claiming responsibility. However, the important thing here to take away from this is that this is a marker of further escalations in Eastern Europe. I mean, we've been following this story for a long time. You know my take on it. It doesn't seem like this is getting any better anytime soon. And obviously, there's going to be a lot of theories swirling around out there as to who is behind this. It's a major attack. All the details aren't really out yet, but clearly an escalatory event. And the thing we need to think about here is, we've seen events like this play out in the past, really change the course of world events. And that may be what we are witnessing with this provocation as well. I mean, on the part of who, we don't know. Was it domestic? Was it from Ukraine? Nobody knows yet. I'm sure that you folks watching have your own theories at this point, and maybe more information will come out, as this plays out. But the thing to remember here is that oftentimes with these attacks, as tragic as they are, I mean, any civilian deaths in this manner are senseless and tragic, certainly. However, it's often not the attack itself that creates the biggest problem. It is the response to the attack. So how is Russia going to respond to these attacks? Is this going to be an escalation of the conflict in Ukraine, a conflict already on the verge of a major escalation as NATO troops now appear to be moving into Western Ukraine? Rumors swirl about this. It's a open secret is what some people are calling it. And to thicken the plot on this Russian event in Moscow, this terror attack, so it was a concert hall that was attacked. These armed gunmen coming in there, multiple gunmen just shooting people indiscriminately from what I have seen thus far. Well, look at this. This is from earlier in March. I think this was issued March 9th, if I have the date correct. I don't see the date on the story here, but it was, March 7th. I'm sorry. This was from the U.S. Embassy in Moscow. Security alert. Avoid large gatherings over the next 48 hours. And they specifically warned about concert halls, which was, very strange. Yeah, it says here the embassy is monitoring reports that extremists have imminent plans to target large gatherings in Moscow to include concerts. So, what did Western intelligence services know? How were they clued into this? Likely we will never know definitively the reality of this. That is just how the fog of war works. But I think there's more than meets the eye going on here. I mean, I don't think that's a stretch to say at all. Let me know in the comments if you think it is kind of strange that the U.S. Embassy appeared to be clued into this attack weeks in advance, and specifically mentioning concerts. I mean, that's a very specific warning, if you ask me. On the same note, regarding inflation and Russia, to kind of bring these things together, here's one from Reuters. U.S. has urged Ukraine to halt strikes on Russian energy infrastructure. So we have been following these stories of Ukrainian kamikaze drones being launched at Russian petroleum refineries, at Russian energy facilities. And let me pause real quick here. We got 228 people on the live stream. Do me a favor and smash that like button if you are watching. That is one of the best ways you can support this channel. We got about 44 thumbs up. If everybody smashed it, we get to over 100 real quick. I would really appreciate that. So the United States has urged Ukraine to halt strikes on Russian energy infrastructure. They're warning that drone strikes risk provoking retaliation. Here's the real kicker: driving up global oil prices. I mean, that seems so obvious that it's just shocking to me that they have to issue a warning on this. But it also shows you what the priorities here are of U.S. leadership. I mean, we're in an election year. They don't want inflation to run out of control. Now, they don't want the whole banking sector to collapse either. It's probably why the Fed is going to have to end up getting in there and stimulating and slashing rates. But I mean, anything they can do to mitigate the effects of inflation moving forward, they will likely attempt, because it doesn't really jive with their public support for these conflicts around the world. And yet that is likely what we are going to see. I mean, we have got the Red Sea now compromised in terms of transiting energy products and various goods via the trade route there because of the Houthis in Yemen, who now, by the way, have agreed not to target Russian and Chinese ships. Kind of gives you an idea, again, of these battle lines being drawn out. But let's take a look at the price of crude oil here. Taking a bit of a breather today. It's still up over 80 bucks, though. This is on the 3-month charts, going from about $70 to over 80 in a fairly short period of time. We know gasoline prices rising was a big contributor to the higher than expected CPI data that we recently got for February. Well, you can expect that to continue. And, I don't know how likely Ukraine is to heed these warnings. I don't know how tight of a leash the U.S. has their military on, but they've been launching a lot of these attacks. I mean, there was one day where they launched something like 70 drones, and that was the day that we saw Rosneft, one of the big oil majors in Russia, their largest refinery, the condensing tower got hit by 3 drones. So, that's really dangerous, obviously, in a oil refinery facility, because, you have all of these volatile compounds, potentially flammable compounds, which could, trigger a massive fire, massive explosions. So the problem here is that as Russia now has to fear for these attacks, they have to prepare for them. They may shut down parts of their energy infrastructure. They may run at a reduced load, perhaps for safety purposes. And Russia, you got to remember, is one of the biggest, I think they're the number 2 exporter of petroleum products around the world. So a major disruption to the Russian energy infrastructure, it's going to mean higher inflation, or, to the extent that it doesn't lead to higher inflation, it'll prevent inflation coming down from the level it's already at, all other things being the same. So the U.S. warning there, but I have a strong suspicion that those attacks are going to continue. Here's another one while we're on the subject of global conflict, one that I think we really should take heed of. This is also from Reuters here in the cybersecurity department. U.S. warns hackers are carrying out attacks on water systems. So, this goes to show you how important preparing for not just financial calamity, which seems almost assured at this point. I mean, that one is the one that I think is probably most important to prepare for, because it's the one that is guaranteed. But according to this report, the U.S. government is warning state governors that foreign hackers are carrying out disruptive cyber attacks against water and sewage systems throughout the country, as in this is ongoing. This is not something that we may experience in the future that you need to be warned about. No, this is something that is going on right now. And one of the problems is that water systems in the U.S., I mean, they barely have the funding and the staffing to keep the water flowing, let alone, guarding against cybersecurity attacks. And in many places, even just basic cybersecurity protocols like updating passwords and running software updates are not taking place. And so they're singling out here in this warning Iranian and Chinese cyber saboteurs who they say are creating a backdoor into these systems, and they may just be doing it in preparation for some future event. Now, I mean, what would that be? Well, it could be the initiation of hostilities in Iran, it could be the initiation of hostilities in the South China Sea. Got that notification or update from Taiwanese news yesterday that now U.S. troops are going to be permanently stationed on the island of Taiwan. So some significant escalations there. But, China apparently has some means of punching back. But right now, they're just setting up shop. They're finding these back doors, they're getting access, and they're sitting on it. So you can't take the water flowing out of your tap for granted. Now, preparing for water is going to depend, where you are. If you have ready available sources of water, maybe all you need is some filtration. Maybe you need some storage. You may want to think long term because, I mean, if these attacks go down, you've seen how long and prolonged these cyber attacks can last. I mean, how long did the attack recently on Change Healthcare affect pharmacies around the country? As far as I know, some of them are still struggling. People are having to go in with handwritten doctor's notes because the computer systems aren't working. But I mean, think about it. How would you do without your taps working for a week? How would you do if it was for a month? And, there's a lot of considerations here, right? Sanitation, drinking, all of these things that we depend on ready access to water utilities from. But just, as a mental exercise, I think it's important to go through and just think, what would I do if this didn't work, right? Go shut off the water to your house for a day and see how it affects things, because it's going to be very disruptive, obviously. And if you wait until some event like this plays out, I mean, if the water systems are getting targeted around the country, you think you're going to be able to go out and buy a water filter? No, there's not going to be any left on the shelf. So this is the kind of thing, basic necessities that you're preparing to provide for yourself. You need to do it in advance. So that is just an aside, but I thought that was worth mentioning because I think it's a very critical area of preparedness that we all need to consider as these conflicts continue to escalate around the world. Of course, what did they do in the old days for water purification? They'd throw some silver in there, right? Today you can get silver embedded water filtration systems that work really well. So, just something to think about. Now, all of these conflicts around the world, Eastern Europe, South China Sea, Middle East, all of these things are likely to contribute to the inflationary crises in multiple ways. It's not just the fact that supply chains will be disrupted, but also that any military conflict is unfortunately going to have to be financed entirely with borrowed money. And the US national debt now sits at $34.59 trillion, just on the verge of 34.6. So, we're well on our way to hitting $35 trillion this year. What did the I don't have the story pulled up, but Congress has now proposed this $1.2 trillion funding package to avert a government shutdown. I mean, how much of a joke is this, right? That we have hundreds of billions of dollars to send around the world to finance conflicts with which, we really don't need to have any involvement if we weren't playing the, global empire game. And yet they have to pass these emergency measures just to keep the government funded and operational, right? I mean, if there was ever a sign of a dysfunctional financial system, to me, that is it. And it's just another sign of how unsustainable the path that we are currently on really is. And I mean, if you just have a basic understanding of mathematics, like I'm talking, first or second grade level math, you can understand that U.S. unfunded liabilities to the tune of $213.9 trillion, it's completely untenable. Now, right now, I think in the Senate, the Republicans, or maybe it was in the House, the Republican politicians, one of these legislative bodies, are putting together a program to try to raise the retirement age for Social Security, which, it might actually make some kind of sense. I'm sure some of you watching are absolutely pounding your smart devices or your screens right now, yelling at me that I'm a fool for saying that. But here's the thing. I mean, Social Security contributes about $26 trillion to those unfunded liabilities. At the end of the day, those benefits are either going to be cut or they are going to be paid in worthless, devalued currency. That's exactly what Alan Greenspan told us in congressional testimony when he said, they can guarantee benefits in any dollar amount, but they cannot guarantee their purchasing power. But this suggestion, I think they were going to raise the age from 65 to 67 for retirement to collect Social Security. You just watch how much pushback they get on this. I mean, already the existing, dementia patient guy in the White House is saying that this is, them greedy politicians trying to steal the benefits from the American people. You got to understand, when Social Security was created back in the 1930s, average U.S. life expectancy was 61 years old. So, the fact that people now are living dramatically longer than that, collecting these benefits for a long time. I mean, look, I understand. I've paid into Social Security too. I know a lot of people have, but I mean, you've been conned, right? We all have. And it's going to be a lot worse than losing Social Security benefits when all of this plays out, because what we're in for here is a complete debasement of the US dollar. That is the path that we have been set on. So, listen, it's probably a good idea. Get into some hard assets. Don't count on external systems of support. I'm not telling anybody what to do. I'm not giving financial advice. I'm just telling you how I view this stuff. And look, I know my demographic tends to run, let's say 40 plus. A lot of people may already be retired, nearing retirement. Uh, I'm, just under that demographic. And I can tell you that, I mean, I don't count on receiving one red cent from Social Security, at least not one that is capable of buying anything, right? I mean, maybe I probably won't get a copper penny for it. Maybe I'll get a plastic penny, or I'm sure by the time I get old enough to collect retirement, pennies won't even be a thing anymore unless we've had a complete monetary, reassessment of the whole system. But it's not looking good for the US dollar here. Central banks around the world, they're loading up on hard assets, except in the West, they are cutting rates, right? And we are about to see the Fed begin cutting rates very soon, probably in June. This seems to be a touchy subject. I've seen other YouTubers, people that I follow, people in the same vein who say, nope, no rate cuts are coming this year. I have a hard time believing that. I mean, I think if the Fed takes away the rate cuts now, which have been basically priced into the market, they really run a risk of collapsing everything. I mean, maybe we won't get three. Maybe they'll hone it down to two when inflation really starts running out of control. But it's an election year, and they're about to find themselves in a very difficult situation where we are experiencing economic decline, stagflationary decline at the same time that inflation is very elevated, and they want to get in there and stimulate. I mean, that is what the Federal Reserve, that is what central banks do. They only have one tool, right? And yeah, you get it in the chat there. You're going to have a collapse either way. 72 Brundlefly. As soon as rate cut happens, it's hyperinflation time. Well, yeah, probably. I mean, I don't know if I'd go so far as hyperinflation as soon as they begin cutting rates, but elevated inflation, yeah, 100%. And unfortunately, the way things are going, we may be on the path to a hyperinflation. I mean, that is not outside of the realm of the possibilities that we are facing. I think that as this conflict continues to play out, between the West, the old guard, the old empires, and the global South, Russia, China, BRICS, all the rest, things are going to happen here that nobody right now, or very few members of the public, can imagine. And, there will be events that play out. There will be changes to our economic system in this century that, you would need, I think, science fiction type level creativity to imagine and to forecast. Now, what exactly that'll look like, I'm not sure. However, fiat currencies, they're all in a race to the bottom, and I see them changing quite a bit as this plays out. And having some hard assets that can really carry you over to whatever the next system is going to be, I think will be a critical preparation for that occurrence. But let me know what you think. leave me a comment down below to let me know what you think about all of these topics that we covered in today's live stream. Do me a favor, smash that like button, subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet, share the video please on social media, and stay safe everybody. Happy stacking. I'll catch you next time. Smart Silver Stacker out.